Let's jump into the weeds. For today, let's jump into CCPA for a start. All right. So the California Consumer Privacy Act, it's a landmark shift in the US privacy law. It's comprehensive framework and it grants consumer control over their personal data. It became effective 2020. And one thing you would notice is in the US specifically, there's a slogan that says, where California goes the rest of the nation. California is known for, my California folks love to hear, but they are known for being like outlier, they will do their own thing. Why? I guess they have the bragging right. It's a 4 point something trillion-dollar economy. If it was a country, it would be number six country in the world, on its own. So it's a big state. It has a huge chunk of pie. So we can't take it for granted. So because of that, they take pride in making sure they also have additional layer of protection for their own people, inclusive for even any HR laws or regulation. They make theirs very, very different. So which is good. So what is CCPA? It empowers consumer in general. It gives every California resident extensive right over their personal information and data usage, almost like the GDPR for European Union members. It also mandates business compliance. So it mandates companies to disclose, delete, and restrict personal data use upon the consumer request. So if you request from the business that your information should be deleted or restricted, they have to oblige. And it has broad application, you know, um, mostly for profit companies processing California residents' information for personal data, regardless of the location, it does not matter. So wherever you are, if you have California businesses, it's applicable to you. So it's a big deal. What are the key consumer privacy rights? So you have a right to know, you have a right to delete, you have a right to opt out, you have a right to correct. What does that mean? The right to know means I can ask you for disclosure of what personal data is collected, used, and shared with third party. I have a right to do that. I have a right to ask you to delete my personal information. I have a right to opt out. I can decide that, well, I don't want to have you sell or share my information again. I have a right to correct also. You know, I can ask you to correct any inaccurate data and limit sensitive information processing. So you have that right too, which is pretty good. So what are the business obligation under CCPA? At the end of the day, business are going to be, very, very targeted, right? So request method, you have to provide at least two ways for consumers to submit their privacy requests, such as a web form or an email. Your response timeline within 45 days to respond to consumer privacy request. You have to have a notice requirement. So your privacy notices and do not sell my information option must be shown prominently. So there should be a check mark that says, okay, don't sell my information for any reason. Then vendor management, ensure third-party vendors and data brokers honor those consumer rights and privacy requests. So you as a business, this is an obligation you have to oblige to. There's no option, or else you'll be at risk of violating those laws. What is the impact on cybersecurity practice? Of course, data protection is a big one. Breach consequences. How do we get notified or trigger if there's a breach? Then what about the enforcement link? So that's also a big part from a cyber angle. What is the compliance requirement and the penalties? So we're talking about the enforcement. The California Attorney General has a full enforcement power for any violation. So that's a big one. We also have the financial penalties. So we are saying the statutory damage could range from 100 to 750 per incident. An additional civil penalty up to 75,000, 7,500 per intentional violation possible. So this could be really, really bad. So if I have 20,000 California residents in my business and one incident is $750 by, you know, that amount of people. So it adds up so crazy, you know. So what about the operational requirement? You must train your staff on all the key privacy procedure and regulate your policy frequently also. What's the trend line? What are we seeing in general and the updates so far? There's been a lot of amendments effective from January 2023. There's been increased enforcement. So now the assumption is that most people should be familiar with the laws. There have been constant audits. There's been enforcement action against non-compliant businesses, and it's gradually expanding beyond even the state. Other localities are mirroring what California is doing. I've seen state of Washington, even Texas, a couple of other states, Colorado, Maryland, implementing and having their own privacy laws out there. Some best practices, generally we have to agree, regular constant audit, using some good framework out there, staff training and awareness, transparent communication also. These are very, very important piece of best practices in general. So that's really the gist of the CCPA as a whole. I'm going to jump into another one real quick, PIPEDA, real quick. Then we do a quick quiz to kind of gauge your knowledge around it. But like I said before, you will see a trend line. They are similar. Anything privacy. It's just that now there's state level, there is economic bloc level like the European Union GDPR. There is national level like PIPEDA for Canada. So which we're going to jump in right now. So let's quickly go to PIPEDA real quick. All right. So this is the Canada federal privacy law, and the intent is to protect personal information around privacy within the citizens' information in general. What is PIPEDA? The privacy law, and it stands for Personal Information Protection and Electronic Document Act. It governs private sector data across Canada. It was established 2000. It boosts consumer trust to ensure that at least our information is protected. What is the scope and focus? It applies to private sector organization conducting any kind of commercial activity in Canada. It regulates, remember again, the collection, the use, and the disclosure practice. What are the kind of information we're talking about? We're talking about your health record, your medical data, financial information and transaction, employment record and background information, digital identifiers and online behavior, including your cache. So any kind of, a lot of people captures cookies, catch any of those things are also considered personal information in general. What are the protection under PIPEDA? Transparency, typical. There should be consent before my data is collected, used, or disclosed. There should be access right. I can request access and request correction on my personal data. Then there should be compliant process also. You know, I can always ask you, I have a right to ask about the collection practice you follow and file a formal complaint if there was one. What is the legal requirement and exceptions in general? So it's national security for any kind of investigation for national interest that could be exempted. For law enforcement, they might bypass consent if they have a letter from judge or like a grand jury. For emergency situation, if it's emergency, they could make exception for you. Then if it's there's the CSA model code based on Canadian Standard Association framework also. So these are some of those exceptions that you could have if there was a need for an emergency most times. What is the penalty and enforcement? So we're talking about 80,000 fine I know sometimes we might think, well, that's not a lot, but for some organization, you know, it can be substantial. I mean, and if you keep violating, it could be much more worse. You know, one, you'll be under the oversight of the Office of Privacy Commissioner. Now you're on their radar. Then, there'll be a need to continuously have a mandatory review of your current state. So now the regulators are putting their eyes on you. You've been fined, and now you have a requirement to make sure there's no further violation for another 5 years. So it gets a little bit tricky at that point. Like every other thing around privacy, we have to think about the security in terms of data protection, breach notification. You have to notify those affected in a timely manner, then ensure that security standards are followed to maintain PIPEDA compliance in general.